In my life, I have always struggled and envied people who have figured out a way to make a difference in the world.
At 78, David Letterman is finally breaking his silence. And this time, he's not holding back. Late-night legend, quick-witted host, and master of the unexpected, Letterman spent decades making millions laugh. But behind that iconic desk, some guests could really rattle him. Who were they? What went so wrong that even a comedy king felt pushed to his limit? You'll hear about tense standoffs, awkward collisions, and one face-to-face confrontation so heated it changed the way Letterman handled his show forever. Get ready. These are the 8 guests David Letterman absolutely could not stand, and you'll never look at these interviews the same way again. 8. Madonna. When David Letterman invited Madonna onto his show on March 31, 1994, he was expecting a lively and playful interview. Madonna was a household name at the time, a pop culture powerhouse known for pushing boundaries, and Letterman hoped her bold persona would create some memorable television. His strategy was straightforward: lean into her rebellious style and toss her a few provocative jokes to spark playful banter. But what he envisioned as witty back and forth quickly took a dramatic turn. Madonna arrived with her own energy, not one to simply follow the host's lead, and from the outset, it became clear that the night would go in a very different direction. Letterman had met outspoken guests before, but he was not fully prepared for just how far Madonna was going to take it. The incident itself is one of the most infamous in talk show history. Madonna spent much of the interview casually dropping F-bombs, using the word repeatedly despite network restrictions, and even went so far as to call Letterman a sick man, clearly catching him off guard. The conversation veered into unpredictable and often confrontational territory, making the exchange feel tense rather than charming. Even though Letterman had been hoping for humor, it was Madonna who dictated the tone. Rumors circulated later that Madonna had decided before the show even began that she would push boundaries as far as she could to see how Letterman would react. Letterman himself appeared increasingly uncomfortable, often laughing nervously as the crowd alternated between applause and gasps. By the time the interview wrapped up, Letterman looked like someone who had learned an unexpected and harsh lesson about the perils of provocation. The impact of the appearance was felt immediately. Ratings soared as millions tuned in to the completely messed-up program on live television. Some viewers considered it groundbreaking. Others said it was a train wreck. Both Madonna and Letterman left the set angry and frustrated with each other, as crew members later recalled. Letterman himself has admitted he mishandled the interview by underestimating Madonna and then pushing her in ways that backfired. Instead of coming off as witty and in control, Letterman appeared flustered, and Madonna owned the moment entirely. Critics and columnists debated who had crossed the line more: Madonna for her provocative behavior, or Letterman for setting up a dynamic that encouraged friction. Years after this unforgettable interview, the Madonna incident is still studied as a defining moment in Letterman's career. It showed him and his audience that not every guest could be guided into polite comedy with ease. Though rumors persist that Letterman and Madonna secretly reconciled years later and even shared a mutual respect for the boldness of that broadcast, neither party has ever gone on record confirming these stories. What cannot be denied is that this particular night was a watershed moment for Letterman. It reinforced the unpredictable nature of live television and forced him to rethink his approach to edgier guests. Whether seen as entertainment or discomfort, Madonna's March 1994 appearance became one of the most talked-about interviews in late-night history, a vivid reminder that even experienced hosts could be blindsided. And just when you thought one clash like that was enough, this next guest didn't just test Letterman's patience, she pushed the limits of what live television could take. 7. Sher. Of all David Letterman's memorable and often unpredictable interviews over the years, few rival his tense exchanges with Sher during the mid-1980s. At that point in his career, Letterman was still hosting NBC's Late Night, and Sher was a guest with a well-known reputation for sharp wit and a fearless tongue. Letterman had built his show on a balance of sardonic humor and disarming charm, but Sher was not one to play along politely simply because she was on a talk show set. Unlike most guests who seemed to understand that the stage was Letterman's playground, Sher was clearly her own star with her own expectations. This was especially true in a moment that would go down as one of Letterman's most infamous encounters with a celebrity. Sher appeared not because she was eager to promote anything particular, but because she was a cultural icon who could choose where and when to show up. This independence set the stage for an unpredictable meeting between two strong personalities. That particular incident involved a tense exchange that left audiences and crew alike stunned. Throughout their conversation, Letterman attempted to prod Sher into some light, playful banter, but Sher responded icily. Without a trace of hesitation, and much to Letterman's surprise, Sher called him an asshole on air, an insult that was unrehearsed and so candid that it made everyone in the studio gasp. Unlike most guests, who would at most joke lightly at the host's expense, Sher crossed a line rarely seen on late-night television at the time. The moment felt electric and raw, the kind of television that wouldn't be considered appropriate by most showrunners. What's more, in the mid-1980s, this was long before the era of viral videos and social media clips. Despite that, the moment took on a life of its own as people talked about it for years. Rumors even spread that Letterman and Sher refused to speak off-air afterward, although there is no concrete proof of that. It remains unclear whether these are exaggerations. Still, nobody could deny that her remark left a lasting impression. The immediate aftermath saw discomfort, and fascinatingly, the exchange became a touchstone for tension in late-night television, even when most people had yet to lay their hands on words such as going viral. Sher had successfully put forth that she would be one to not be easily led into the neat and polished soundbites typical of a talk show interview. Letterman himself would later admit to being unprepared, but knew that Sher would never be receptive to the featherlight atmosphere engaged by most visitors on the show. Though polite enough to keep the air clear in future encounters on the show, an ice-cold undertone would remain down the line whenever Sher appeared again. This was a different dynamic altogether, where one could set the nerves jangling in an established personality who otherwise loved a bit of friction for his job. However, years afterward, it remained fresh in people's minds as one of those few vanishingly fleeting moments captured on television that so perfectly capture the idiosyncratic kaleidoscope of live entertainment. Yet, whether the tales of some prolonged feud between them are exaggerated or partly true remains murky, Sher never apologized for her blatant remarks, and Letterman never seemed to demand one. What cannot really be denied is the public's long memory of the incident, which was simultaneously filled with tension and spontaneity. It stood as a frank reminder of how, sometimes, fame and personality can have disastrous clashes on such unfiltered front lines. Even during the entire course of Letterman's career, and during countless other interviews with controversial guests, the moment stood out as being remarkable for authenticity. That is as riveting as live television can get when the guest is completely forthright and the host is rendered speechless for once. 6. Jennifer Aniston. When Jennifer Aniston appeared on David Letterman's show in 1998, she was at the height of her popularity. Fresh off several successful seasons of Friends, Aniston was one of the most recognizable and beloved stars on television. Guests like Aniston usually made for a light, breezy conversation on late-night talk shows, and the audience was primed for a friendly, entertaining interview. However, what was meant to be a fun segment took a strange and deeply uncomfortable turn. Letterman had a reputation for pushing boundaries with his guests, often testing their patience and his comedic range. But even by those standards, this particular incident was startling. Nobody anticipated that the interview would take a bizarre and cringeworthy twist, one that still raises eyebrows years later. During the segment, Letterman abruptly leaned across his desk and grabbed a lock of Aniston's hair. Without warning, he put the hair in his mouth and sucked on it. The audience responded with a mix of nervous laughter and surprised gasps, clearly uncertain whether this was meant to be part of the comedy or just an inexplicable breach of decorum. Aniston herself was visibly unsettled, pulling back and laughing awkwardly as she tried to process what had just happened. Letterman attempted to play it off as a joke, the kind of spontaneous bit that might have seemed harmless to him at the time. But the discomfort on Aniston's face told a very different story. Many watching felt as though Letterman had crossed a personal boundary, making the entire exchange feel less like comedy and more like an invasive stunt. The afterlives were equally revealing. Hardly as clip replacements showed, people began voicing disapproval. Commentators noted that what Letterman had done was inappropriate, especially when the very term itself would be a guest-host-collaborator relationship, bringing to bear a translation between the often unnoticed power differential. Some added that even Aniston's discomfort raised even bigger questions about how women were viewed while under television surveillance in that era. Rumors circulated that Aniston had been flying mad after the taping, although that allegation was never confirmed in the press. What was certain was that the moment would propel replay and discussion for many more years after, serving as one of the more criticized and awkward moments in all of Letterman's long career. The 1998 interview is still, some 2 decades later, one of the best examples of how sometimes Letterman could misjudge the line that edges between edgy humor and personal discomfort. It served as a reminder that not all so-called off-the-cuff comedy is funny, especially when it violates a guest's boundaries. While Letterman continued on to have a celebrated career until retirement as the senatorial elder statesman in late-night comedy, the clip with Aniston lives on as a demonstration that even the greats may have crossed the line. Some may consider it a lapse in judgment moment, while it may resonate in their minds as part of an ongoing pattern of behavior that would be completely unacceptable today. Whatever the case may hold, that embarrassing moment ensured that Aniston would be remembered long after the segment was over. 5. Lindsay Lohan, 2013. When Lindsay Lohan appeared on David Letterman's show in 2013, the intention was for a light and friendly chat. Lohan had recently completed a stint in rehab, and much of the public was hoping to see her back on track personally and professionally. Letterman had invited her to promote her latest work and, ostensibly, to give her a chance to present herself in a more positive light after years of tabloid scrutiny. Going into the interview, most viewers assumed the conversation would center around Lohan's career, her plans for the future, and maybe a gentle acknowledgement of her difficult past. Given Letterman's decades of hosting experience, audiences expected him to navigate the discussion with sensitivity, allowing Lohan to speak for herself rather than turning the segment into an interrogation. That's not what happened. Instead, Letterman began to press Lohan with increasingly pointed and personal questions about her addiction and her time in rehab. Early in the interview, he started joking about addiction and recovery, eventually asking invasive questions like, "Aren't you supposed to be in rehab right now?" and "How long will you be in rehab?" Lohan responded politely but visibly unsettled, laughing nervously as she tried to deflect the barrage. What began as a light promotional appearance morphed into something much more personal, and the power dynamic was glaring. Lohan was in a vulnerable position, forced to navigate difficult questions on national television. The segment generated awkward tension in the studio, which was evident in the subdued audience laughter. Even Letterman himself seemed to recognize the shift in tone, though by then it was too late to turn back. Years later, as the public conversation about addiction and mental health changed, and society became more sensitive toward women's experiences in the entertainment industry, that interview clip went back online. Those who missed the segment when it aired became outraged watching a veteran talk show host cavalierly dismiss a young woman during one of the hardest times of her life. As critics called out Letterman's actions as exploitative and utterly unwarranted due to Lohan's previous attempts at recovery, rumors spread that he had privately apologized after the show, which was denied by both sides. One thing became clear. It started to garner sympathy for Lohan from a wider audience, and in turn, it became part of a much larger discussion on the media treatment of people recovering from addiction. To see, in that 2013 interview, exactly how Letterman employs such familiar to his faithful audience tricks doesn't age well. To most modern audiences, Letterman probably thought he was delivering comic relief in light of some serious subject. The clip stands as a cautionary tale for hosts with weighty platforms to note how they contribute to a culture that shames instead of supporting those who are recovering. Indeed, Letterman is famous for his acerbic comedy and deft style of interviewing. But this particular story is likely to be one of the darker moments in his career that continues drawing raised eyebrows several years after the laughter dies down. And if that interview raised eyebrows, this next guest would spark a firestorm that proved some jokes hit harder than laughs. 4. Sarah Palin's daughter. In 2009, David Letterman faced one of the most controversial and troubling incidents of his career. What started as one of his signature monologue jokes quickly spiraled into a public relations nightmare. The joke targeted Sarah Palin, the former Alaska governor and 2008 vice presidential candidate, who had recently attended a Yankees game with one of her daughters. Letterman attempted to craft a risque joke around the trip, intending to refer to Palin's older daughter, Bristol. However, the setup backfired when Letterman failed to clearly specify which daughter he was talking about. Many people assumed the joke was aimed at Palin's 14-year-old daughter, Willow, who was actually the one at the game. Within hours, the gag provoked backlash that far exceeded Letterman's expectations, revealing a serious lapse in judgment for someone so experienced in late-night comedy. The reaction was swift and fierce. Almost immediately, Palin and her supporters took to television and social media to voice their anger. Many argued that the joke crossed a clear line into inappropriate and personal territory, especially considering it could be read as directed at a minor. Palin herself publicly called Letterman's remarks perverted, and media outlets from across the political spectrum picked up the story. Rumors circulated that sponsors were putting pressure on CBS to respond, and some Palin supporters even organized protests outside the Late Show studios. The controversy put Letterman in an unfamiliar position. Rather than commanding the comedy, he was forced into full damage control, facing serious questions about his judgment, his show's standards, and his sense of humor. The incident made a big mark on Letterman. With his sharp one-liners and laid-back style of being on camera, he was famous for not feeling any remorse over what he said. But this was different. After days of backlash and fierce commentary about what he had said, he exceptionally apologized on air. He admitted that in the minds of a lot of people, even in his own mind, he had hoped to be funny about an adult public figure and would never, ever have conceived that he had actually made any comments about a teenager or offended a teenager. Specifically, however, he stated that there was no justification for the outcome based upon intent. Viewers and media commentators agreed that this was one of the very few instances they had ever seen the anchor in such a serious mood. Even many years later, he would refer to it as one of the lowest moments of my career, a point when he forgot to recognize the personal toll of what was supposed to be entertainment. In retrospect, the Palin joke contretemps would probably be one of the most fateful adventures and cautionary fables of Letterman. Rumors lingered for quite a while about damages to relationships within the network and ill will caused by the incident between Letterman and certain staff members, though none of those assertions were ever publicly confirmed. True or untrue as those rumors may be, one thing cannot be denied. They proved to have long-lasting effects both on him and on the public. Late-night comedy often straddles that fine line between satire and sensitivity, and this moment served to remind Letterman that words, particularly when aimed outside the political arena, have power. Even as years passed and Letterman finally hung it up, this chapter in his work underlined the point that even veteran hosts have to thread that difficult line between humor and harm. 3. Paris Hilton. When Paris Hilton appeared on David Letterman's show in 2007, the set was dressed like a typical late-night interview segment, but the tone quickly shifted into something far more tense. Hilton was there to promote her latest business ventures and hoped to move past the notoriety surrounding her brief jail sentence earlier that year. Many expected Letterman to, at most, acknowledge her legal troubles briefly and then transition into lighter topics about her projects. However, from the moment the interview began, it was evident that Letterman had other plans. Throughout the conversation, he repeatedly steered back to her jail time, his questions less playful than pointed, making the segment feel more like an interrogation than a comedy bit. Hilton's visible discomfort grew with every joke about prison, and the audience shifted between laughter and sympathy, unsure whether to keep laughing as the awkwardness became increasingly obvious. Hilton, usually poised in public appearances, was clearly unsettled as Letterman pressed her about her incarceration experience. Despite her attempts to gently pivot the conversation to other subjects, her perfume line, her career as a socialite and businesswoman, Letterman seemed intent on circling back to jail. Viewers could see her smile becoming forced, her hands nervously fidgeting as she answered questions she probably hoped had been left behind. Rumors that Hilton had explicitly asked Letterman's team to avoid bringing up her legal troubles circulated afterward, though they were never officially confirmed. Whether or not those claims were true, what was certain was that this interview put Hilton in an awkward and highly public position, with millions of people watching her endure questions that made her deeply uncomfortable. That interview from 2007 would be played over and over again through the years as an example of Letterman at his meanest, a technique that modern audiences have reevaluated as one somewhat devoid of amusement because of their awareness of the trauma associated with prolonged incarceration and the complex lives public figures lead. Commentators have all said that Letterman, who built his old career on satirical wit, crossed the line when he kept pushing Hilton into an almost impossible corner from which she could not escape gracefully. Just about all those who dug out the clip years after the fact said that it felt more like sympathy for Hilton, who at the time was still learning to cope with media glare at its harshest, and viewed as really very unnecessary aggressiveness on Letterman's part. It was just one of those many reminders that really well-celebrated jokes sometimes do not age all that well. In much later interviews at the end of his career, he did find time to say that some of his on-air behavior and choices in the past were not the proudest, often not directly naming the particular incident in question. He'd usually talk more vaguely about how sometimes he might have taken things too far, especially in the brutal world of ratings-driven late-night television. 2. Wayne Newton. Wayne Newton was one of the most famous performers in Las Vegas, known for his polished public persona and smooth crooner style. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Newton enjoyed immense success as one of the city's top headliners, earning him the nickname Mr. Las Vegas. David Letterman, famous for his sharp humor and biting monologue, often targeted Newton as a recurring punchline. Letterman's jokes played off Newton's larger-than-life image, his immaculate stage presence, polished looks, and even his hair. Audiences generally responded with laughter, and Letterman appeared comfortable poking fun at a star who embodied the glitzy spectacle of Las Vegas. What Letterman didn't expect was that Newton was not at all amused. Over time, the jabs began to wear thin. Rumors from crew members suggested that Newton was tired of seeing himself regularly ridiculed on a national stage and decided to address the issue directly. The most well-known incident happened one day in the early 1980s when Newton appeared uninvited at NBC studios to speak with Letterman face-to-face. According to those present, Newton barged into Letterman's office after a taping, closing the door behind him and calmly telling Letterman that if the jokes continued, there would be consequences. Some versions of the story even claim Newton threatened Letterman physically, though these have never been officially confirmed. Even if those rumors were exaggerated, what everyone agrees on is that Newton's direct personal confrontation left Letterman visibly shaken. Once this tense encounter had occurred, Letterman suddenly ceased making jokes about Newton on the air. Unlike such other recurring guests as Sher or Madonna, Newton vanished altogether from Letterman's comedy routines. Behind the set, Letterman admitted to his staff the meeting had caught him off guard. Henceforth, he would be more cautious. Whether this was due to Newton's wishes or Letterman was indeed unnerved by the entire confrontation never quite made clear to him, but the effect was visible. Writers noted that the show conveyed a rather different attitude to Newton overnight, and it was as though a particular comedic boundary had been drawn. Years later, as he reflected on the incident, Letterman would not often mention it publicly, which only added to the drama surrounding it. Even if some of the most dramatic claims that Newton ever made threatened directly, for example, resided in the rumor category, there was surely much that made Letterman rethink the way he did comedy with a few specific guests. Beyond the immediate change on the show, the incident also had a ripple effect across the comedy world. Other late-night hosts and writers took note of Newton's willingness to confront ridicule head-on, and some quietly revised their own approaches toward similar long-running bits. The story of Newton's visit became a kind of cautionary tale in entertainment circles, a reminder that even the most practiced routines could provoke a very real and personal backlash. The onstage altercation itself, the incident had repercussions around the comedy world. It drew the attention of late-night hosts and writers to Newton's willingness to face ridicule head-on. A lot of them quietly rethought their own approaches to similar long-running bits. The story of Newton's visit has turned, almost, into a cautionary tale in entertainment circles, a reminder that pruned routines can indeed yield real, personal backlash. And if that was tense, his last guest would show that even Letterman could misstep with a daytime television icon. 1. Oprah Winfrey. When Oprah Winfrey first appeared on David Letterman's show during the late 1980s, the encounter was anything but smooth. Letterman was known for his witty, irreverent humor, which often pushed the boundaries of comfort for his guests. Oprah, however, was at the height of her career as a respected talk show host and media figure who was less accustomed to sparring with hosts who might challenge or tease her persona. From the outset, there was an underlying tension that quickly became obvious. Letterman attempted to joke at Oprah's expense, relying on personal remarks that weren't always warmly received. What Letterman probably thought would come across as light-hearted humor, instead left Oprah feeling disrespected, as if she were the butt of jokes meant to provoke. The interview failed to generate the kind of easy, engaging conversation that Letterman was famous for with most guests, and it created an early and unexpected rift between two television powerhouses. That tense exchange had lasting repercussions. According to Oprah herself, she left Letterman's show feeling hurt and angry, and as a result, she avoided appearing on his program for years. Rumors circulated at the time, and persisted for years, suggesting that Oprah had been so upset by that first appearance that she privately decided to never return. Though those rumors were never fully confirmed by either party for quite some time, Oprah's 16-year absence from Letterman's guest list spoke volumes. Letterman continued on with his career, hosting countless celebrities, but Oprah's absence was conspicuous. Given her cultural prominence and the overlap in their audiences, the years of radio silence felt noticeable, if not deliberate. Industry insiders took the hiatus as evidence that Letterman had overstepped in his efforts to get laughs at Oprah's expense, and that Oprah was in no rush to forgive him. It was only in 2005 that Oprah and Letterman came back together before the cameras, when Oprah made her first appearance as a guest after almost 20 years of estrangement. Their joyful reunion was a kind of turning point for both. Letterman admitted their prior exchange had crossed a line at times, though he never framed it as an apology. Oprah, a true lady and playful spirit, joined Dave in more than one laugh concerning the years gone by. The viewers admired the straight talk and respect between the two, realizing that it was more than an entertainment gesture. It was proof that time heals even the deepest and most public of rifts. For many, the reunion served as a send-off while gracefully reminding us that healing takes time and work, especially when the messes needing resolution involve two powerful characters and a public equally invested in their stories. In retrospect, the Oprah incident is one of Letterman's most glaring mistakes as a host, one that took 16 years to sort out. This is perhaps a testament, whether the stories about phone warfare and behind-the-scenes tensions are true, or just part of the folklore surrounding their relationship. Their meeting showed they didn't have much in common beyond public perception. Letterman's humor leaned on irony and teasing, while Oprah focused on empathy and connection. Their clashing styles created unexpected tension during the interview. That awkward first encounter highlighted how different their media approaches were. So when they finally reconciled, it felt meaningful, like two media worlds finding common ground. That's it for this one. 8 guests who managed to get under David Letterman's skin like nobody else. If you enjoyed these behind-the-scenes stories, give this video a like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and hit subscribe for more deep dives into legendary TV moments. Stick around because the next video on your screen is full of even wilder stories you don't want to miss. Thanks for watching. See you there.